we jump into the panel, we would like to get your opinion following the discussions that we've had. So when do you think that we will be seeing the widespread use of graphene in energy storage devices? Do you think we'll see them in less than 5 years, 5 to 10 years from now, 10 to 15, or never? And while everyone is answering their questions, if all of the speakers and chairs could please turn on their videos and be prepared for the panel discussion, and perhaps stay muted until you get a question, just so that we moderate how much sound we get from the background. All right, so the response was 5 to 10 years from now. Vittorio, would you like to comment on our poll response? Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's optimistic or not optimistic enough?
Well, actually, I voted for less than 5 years, so I was more optimistic. So it's a good compromise. I think that there have been a tremendous advancement in our understanding of two-dimensional materials for energy application in the last 5 years. So fast and so promising that I really do expect a significant impact in one of the technologies that we mentioned. And I think that we did right. I mean, Kristina and Konstantin and Yury pointed out more application rather than simply lithium-ion batteries. And so there are many technologies for, including, you know, hybrid supercapacitors, redox flow, catalysis applications. So I'm very optimistic. And as I mentioned before, in the flagship, some of the partners have reached already a maturity such that a graphene silicon is within an industrial production line of a battery company. So things are moving faster than expected, at least for this specific application.
That's great news. Now, the first question I have was directed in our Q&A, or in the Q&A panel, to Kristina, so I'll let her start, and then the rest of you can weigh in at the end. So the question is, your talk places batteries for mobility at the center of battery demand. Isn't there a twin need for stationary batteries, which for resource and sustainability needs most likely won't be lithium-based? That comes along with increasing use of the actual car batteries in order to locally providing high charging currents that won't blow the grid. So can you comment on that?
Yes, I can. I think that's a very good question, and I think there is some truth in the question also. But probably, if you look at the kind of raw materials we have, and if we are going to have the best batteries we can produce in terms of how much energy we safely can store in a small volume, that will probably go for the cars. And then we might need other kinds of batteries for large-scale storage, where volumetric capacity is not that critical as it is for transportation. You have containers with batteries today, and the question is if you can have one more container or not. It's a question of cost, and it's also a question of durability. If we can make the batteries really living for about 30 years, so it really pays off to have them for solar and for wind power storage. And I think redox flow batteries are interesting, but also sodium can be interesting for these areas. So I think many go for lithium now because there's a sort of volume in the production, but I wouldn't disregard the other technologies at all.
Great. Did anyone else want to add anything to this response?
Oh, well, let me just add something. I think this is one of the roles that new materials can play. Enable use of other ions. For example, multivalent ions are very difficult to get into a solid crystalline lattice and make them diffuse inside. But when you have two-dimensional materials, transport of aluminum, magnesium, calcium, other larger ions becomes possible between the layers with still possibility of charge transfer. So I think we need to look also for new opportunities, and especially see where they become enabling. For example, where highly compact energy storage with high energy density is needed for cell phone-like wearable devices. And probably those will be the first points of entry, and lithium-ion batteries, I think, will be dominating many industries for many years to come.
I wouldn't disagree with this picture. I think we have to do research on all these opportunities to really be able to show the possibilities. And we are in a good phase right now to really push and tell that alongside with the industrial development of making batteries, we actually need long-term thinking and long-term research to enable these kinds of chemistries. Research is extremely important.
I would like to add one thing there also when it comes to what mentioned is that some applications have some demands and some others. We haven't really touched upon the cell voltages possible so much on the cell level, and that differs quite a bit when it comes to how many cells can you afford to have around in a specific device because of your system solution demands something. When it comes to bigger storage systems for solar or for wind, you might afford to have more cells, and that comes down then to a production issue as well. So a versatility of different voltages is also a possibility. You don't have to go high voltage if you don't need to.
Great. So our next question was prompted by Yury's talk, so I'll let you start. The question is, how could we reduce the self-discharge in supercapacitors, and do MXenes reduce the self-charging in comparison to current materials in graphene?
Well, since about MXenes and supercaps, let me take it, or at least start on this question. I already expanded a little bit on this. It's to a very large extent understanding the mechanism. It's more of engineering, eliminating leakage, having a good packaging of the device here. It's a more of electrochemistry, material science to understand what are other mechanisms. Do we have parasitic reactions happening in electrolyte? We need to control surface chemistry and electrolyte and ensure compatibility. Is this ion self-distribution, redistribution, because they were not able to access all the sites inside the system? So what it means that if we select a specific system which we believe is promising for a particular application, then we need to dig deeper and understand what are the reasons for self-discharge, and one by one minimize them, if not completely eliminate.
Did anyone have something to add to this? All right, we'll move to the next question. So the next question was spurred by Kostya's talk. And the question is the material used in the various applications you mentioned, including noise reduction, heat dissipation, indeed graphene in the sense of the term, single layer of carbon atoms, or do most applications rely on graphite nanoplatelets or other physical forms?
Right, it's, I think it's very difficult to answer in one answer, because those applications are so different. For example, the graphene for battery application, graphene for thermal dissipation, it's they mainly use reduced graphene oxide, so it is true graphene if you want. Graphene for noise dissipation, it's I think it is graphite platelets, so it's the distribution of the thicknesses is from 1 to 20 layers, as far as I remember. Now, it's I don't even want to go into discussion what is graphene, what is not. Of course, there are ISIS specification what is graphene, but we also should remember that we always need to tune graphene for specific applications, either to reduce or increase the number of layers. It's been shown experimentally and theoretically that for composite applications, it's better to use not monolayer, but actually 2 or 3 layer graphene. We need to change the functionalization, either surface or edge functionalization, for example, to change the binding properties. So when we talk about any applications, we would need to modify graphene somehow. It will be very, very rarely that we will use just a planar monolayer graphene for some applications. We would always have to adjust its properties somehow.
Can I follow up this point with a question to the speakers? So it's a general one, and it comes from the fact that one of the main property of graphene is the high specific surface area. And when it comes to application in supercapacitors or in batteries, that property actually could not be good. So high specific surface area could lead in batteries to a high, irreversible effects. In supercapacitor may be beneficial, but then there are issues related to the low density of states of graphene, which may limit the capacitance of the system. So the question is, how do you, what is your comment on that? Or maybe what are the other materials that can be considered to address better this point? Maybe Maxine or other van der Waals heterostructures.
I guess I can start answering, but I would hope that experts would join me here. Again, what you said is completely true. For example, for the supercapacitors, the capacitance which you would get if you simply use the surface of graphene is not high enough. You would have to be, because of the low density of state, so you would have to change it somehow, and then pseudocapacitance comes to help, and you would have to modify the chemical composition, introducing nitrogen dopants, for example, amino groups or something else. So it just I would like to reiterate here that for any applications, you would very, very likely modify graphene or any other materials. Like in the example which I demonstrated in my talk, we used MOS2 doped with various elements, and in order to gain in specific characteristics.
Let me continue to this. I fully agree with what was just said. Basically, materials that are used in electrochemical double layer capacitors are often modified, doped with nitrogen, or oxidized. For example, it's like Rodruev's Amego, activated modified reduced graphene oxide, which is just a porous structure with thin walls like a graphene, but very far from conventional monolayers that you can see. And this gives you higher capacitance because we add carriers, we add functional groups by doping graphene. Maxines can bring more redox to it, but all two-dimensional or low-dimensional material in general will have a problem of ACI first cycle irreversibility. And one of the solutions is actually quite well known. Even in the graphite world, people have been using this potato graphite, like spheroidized structures where ACI is formed only on the outer surface. So, similar way, pelletizing, covering particles, leaving internal porosity open for electrolyte, even internal highly accessible area, but having this artificial like a monolayer flakes of graphene, maxine, or anything else on the surface will reduce surface area available for ACI formation, at the same time keep many of the advantages of low dimensional accessible material structures.
Any other thoughts on this? So then our next question is, what is the role of industry versus the role of academia in getting this science translated into an application?
Well, let me start. I think it's again, it's a long discussion here, but first, I think first we need to pose the question right. So if you just formulating the question would be would contribute to half of the answer, right? And it's any research, any industrial research should have a particular goal in mind in terms of improving the performance or lowering the cost or gaining new product on the market, and keeping the focus and asking the right question is the role of the industry. And keeping this focus would really help in developing of the new products. And then scientists and academia will be very happy to help, but the direction should be coming, the overarching direction should be coming from the industry.
If I can continue upon that, in the graphene flagship, when we plan subsequent stages of the flagship, we typically focus on two questions. The first one being what is doable, and the second one, what is worth doing. And often it is so that academics contribute perhaps a little more to the answer of the first question, and industries contribute more to the answer of the second question. And then we need to find the overlap, what is both doable and worth doing, and that's the direction where we go. So it's really a question of collaborating and using each other's strengths.
Kristina, do you have any thoughts on this, especially in light of the work that Batteries 2030 Plus is doing?
Yes, I agree with what has said. And of course, we need to find these meeting places where industry and academia discuss this and work together. And of course, the graphene flagship is a good example of that. And I hope Batteries 2030 Plus will also be that when we now start really doing the projects and the science. Also in our Swedish center, where we will work with the graphene company Matic, I hope we will be able to do more in this area, and also see if any of the Swedish ideas can lead to Swedish sort of industry supporting the strong incentives we have now in Sweden to really be a battery production country. Together with Norway, I would say, very much.
I would like to add a little bit complexity to that thing with industry and academia also when it comes to just batteries, because then we also have now as academians, we have the thing that you have the huge companies of LG Chem, Samsung, but also the whole car industry because of the ongoing electrification. You have the Volkswagen, you have the Toyota, you have the Honda. They are all bringing in research efforts, which means that sometimes a little bit nasty. It said like, well, we did that 20 years ago. The question is then, I mean, our different perspectives. I think that what Jari put up there was absolutely excellent, but also to acknowledge that also some industry R&D, not all of them, but some of them are really ahead of us in some aspects. So we have to pick our winning fights in academia as well, and be open for new things.
If I can add just a small flavor on that, my experience in moving from academia to industry, I was told just the first day that you come for academia and this is the place where you get paid to carry out great work. And here in industry, you have to do great work to be paid. So it's this is a more general consideration how the two fields are complementary but are deeply different.
Thanks, and I think that that's a really good place to leave today's discussion. Obviously, it's not the end of this discussion, and there's many more things that we can discuss. And we do encourage you to check in on us again next year for the graphene study event, especially for those of you who are early career researchers who are really interested in learning more about graphene for energy storage applications. I'd like to give a warm thank you to our chairs, Vittorio Pellegrini, Patrik Johansson, Aleksandar, Matic, and also to our speakers, Jari, Kinaret, Konstantin, Novoselov, Kristina, Edström, and Yury, Gogotsi. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us and to share your insights. It's been really a pleasure. You can go to the next slide. Again, this is just the first of our Graphene 4 digital event series. We will have the next installment and a new event series or event in September. It will actually be a 3-day event, Graphene for Research, Innovation, and Collaboration, and we encourage you all to join us then. And then again, I would like to thank our fabulous dissemination team for all of their hard work on this event. It took many, many more people than who you saw on screen to make this event possible. And I think we can all definitely admit that this has been a great experience for all of us. Please, please, please continue discussing these issues with us on our social media channels. You can find us across all channels at Graphene EU. And if you want to reference today's discussion specifically, use the hashtag Graphene4 or G4 Energy, and we will definitely continue to monitor this. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today, and tune in next time.
Bye-bye, and thank you.
Bye. Thanks all.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.